Welcome to the Liberated Leader podcast. I'm your hostess, B. Chan. Together, we'll connect with leaders in the psychedelic space and explore the creations they birthed into this world, all in hopes to bring the psychedelic renaissance into the 21st century and spread the message of inner healing. Because when we heal ourselves, we heal the world. So, let's get liberated. So today we have Sarai Darbani with us. She is a licensed clinical social worker and Ayahuasca Preparation and Integration coach. She specializes in childhood trauma, helping people optimize their ayahuasca ceremonies, experiences, and transformations. Her company, the Multidimensional Journey, was created in 2018 and provides educational resources like podcasts, YouTube videos, and content dedicated to the ayahuasca preparation and integration process, as well as group breathwork experiences, and for deeper work, private one-on-one coaching. She is extremely passionate about upholding integrity and ethics as this wave of psychedelic therapy happens across the West. Welcome to the pod, Sarai.
Yes. Thank you so much for that lovely intro. And thank you for having me here, B. It's an awesome pleasure and honor. Thank you so much. Yeah.
My pleasure, for sure. I'm so excited to have you on because I actually don't know your story that well. So I'm excited to be, learning all about it and to ask you a whole bunch of questions. So why don't you tell us how you got into psychedelics?
Yeah. So very similar to a lot of people's experiences, which is suffering. I was in a place in 2015. I had just graduated with my master's in social work, and I had gotten a job at this fancy treatment center, and I also just bought like a new car. So in my mind, like from the family that I grew up in, it was always about like, what are you going to do in the world and who are you going to be? And I chased that dream for a really, really long time, pretty much my whole life. And it was this really, I can still remember the experience. Like it's this really crisp experience where I'm driving to my new job, and like in my mind, I have like all these expectations of like, that is when I'm going to be happy and feel whole and have this moment of like oneness with myself. And I basically blurted out in my car, like, I hate myself, like I'm so miserable. I guess the best way I could describe it is like I felt spiritually empty. And as they, say a lot in the 12-step programs, is like spiritually bankrupt. And it's like almost as I uttered those words out loud, the universe began to like create opportunities for me to basically get to know myself better, or in other words, to awaken. And so at this treatment center, I was a therapist and I was given these tasks to do, right? So in the trainings that we go through, they introduce you to their family program. And this is like, people go there to heal like pretty hardcore addiction, pretty hardcore trauma. So as I'm in this training, I'm learning so much about like what I went through as a child. Like I know I'm there to learn for them, but like it's just clicking, click, click. And I'm like, oh my God, that's what happened to me and my family. Oh my God, like this is a problem. And then they also asked me to facilitate Brene Brown's shame resilience program. And as I'm facilitating this program, like I'm awakening to all the unaddressed shame within me. And I didn't even know what shame was before I went to this place. So anyway, like I didn't stay there for very long. I think I was there for a total of like 8 months, but I actually ended up going back to my previous job. And I'm kind of laying out the series of events that kind of just led to the mind-blowing awakening, so to speak.
1 second before we move on there, Sarai.
Yeah, go for it.
You said, Brene Brown's resilience shame program and like some of the childhood trauma that's been clicking for you as you were facilitating this program. Would you be able to share with us some of the things that you've experienced in your childhood? That was
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So in my family, although through my healing, I have come to realize like I was born in the perfect family to awaken to my purpose, um, which I don't believe like you can really jump to without going through some really, really deep work. Um, but in my family, there's mental illness and there's addiction. So my mom has paranoid schizophrenia, and
Mm,
my father has gambling addiction.
mm,
Although very functional individuals, very, very functional, very loving, both came from families that were emotionally shut down. Um, and as you know, generational trauma works, that stuff is passed down onto children, you know. And so as a child, and even as an adolescent and teenager, I was very dissociated.
mm,
Um, I was born on a psych ward, basically. My mom was actively psychotic when I was born. Um, so like that, like there's womb trauma, right? And that's transferred to a child. So for a long time, I was highly dissociated and I didn't even know it, you know, and I think that was definitely a part of my awakening and moving into adolescence. And as an adult, I coped with it through like an eating disorder, a lot of perfectionism. The core belief you could say is I'm not good enough. So constantly trying to receive approval from the world or other people through the ways that I basically, as a young female, like looked around and was like, how can I get attention here? You know? Um, and as I grew up, the eating disorder definitely subsided. But definitely the biggest thing was the central nervous system dysregulation
mm.
that I would later come to heal through EMDR, through 12 step, and definitely through ayahuasca. Um, and just having no access to that inner child and that reparenting pretty much my whole life until I was introduced to it later in a 12-step program that I would thankfully finally arrive to like kind of get the knowledge and the education around what I actually went through.
Hmm. How would you describe disassociation?
Yeah, great question. And I definitely do want to say too, like I I feel free to be so transparent because it's like the intention is to hopefully reach and help somebody else. So I just kind of want to put that out there. So dissociation is like on a spectrum. Basically, dissociation is something that we all do. Um, so like if you ever like kind of zoned out on the highway or if you were zoned out during a conversation, like
Mm,
that's something that most of us experience, right? So and then on the opposite spectrum of that, on the opposite end, like high levels of dissociation or perhaps like being chronically stuck in a freeze state in the central nervous system, which is basically, you know, past the fight or flight system. That's when we completely begin to shut down. That's when we experience like numbness, depression, um, experiences like depersonalization. So when we feel disconnected from ourselves, or derealization when we feel disconnected from our own realities. And it's basically the result of like chronically being in that fight or flight system and never finding that space to come back down and back into the parasympathetic nervous system. So it manifests in all these different ways. So um you know, what we see in mental health, right, is like um you know, that anxiety, that chronic anxiety, that person that just can't ever feel like settled in their body, or that other part of dissociation, like that chronic freeze state, the numbness, the depression, and that sort of thing. Um, and it's ultimately like, I guess the best way I could describe it is like not ever feeling connected to the body. That's often a way to describe it. And I think everyone who kind of suffers with that on the heavy side of the spectrum kind of experiences it in a unique and special way, of course. Um, and of course, all of us kind of we all got to be able to check out sometimes, you know what I'm saying? But when we do it chronically, that's kind of when we see those issues, you know, those chronic unaddressed issues.
Gotcha. How
Yep.
can you, I guess, like, how do you manage that, or how do you be
Yes,
aware of it, and how do you like down regulate yourself?
absolutely. Yeah. So I work a lot with myself, and also with my clients with mindfulness and breath work.
Mhm.
Those are, you know, mindfulness, breath work, and somatic experiencing. So I draw from my teachers, which are John Kabat-Zinn, you know, the father of Zen mindfulness, who brought mindfulness to the West. And I mean, the reason why it's integrated into so many therapies now is because all of the research he's done.
Mhm.
And then also, you know, polyvagal theory by Dr. Stephen Porges, is just his research has done incredible things for mind body therapies and mind body approaches. And of course, Dr. Peter Levine, the creator of somatic experiencing. So it's basically, you know, learning how to slow down. That's the biggest thing.
Mhm.
Um, and the most challenging for most of us in the West. Just slowing down is like a whole situation, right? So yeah, teaching myself and teaching my clients to slow down, to tap into their breathing, and realizing that is the doorway to our parasympathetic nervous system.
Mhm.
And I didn't know that for a lot of my life, you know, just like the simplicity of my breath becoming still and getting out of my head, like, was so incredible. I just never even knew. So those are like, you know, they sound really simple, yet they're so profound. You know, when you can just take someone through an exercise where they get in touch with their breath and they begin to notice, like, you know, how am I sitting in the chair? What does my breath feel like when I breathe in and when I breathe out? And just, right, becoming present moment awareness. Um, that's how we begin to manage it.
Mhm.
um, and then as we move into the deeper work, um, I usually introduce a concept that Dr. Richard Schwartz came up with, which is called internal family systems.
Mhm.
So that's when we start working with maybe other parts of us that are subconscious or under the surface, or who, well, I say who, meaning parts of us that have been kind of suppressed or repressed or shamed.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it could get kind of complicated, but to just keep it simple, mindfulness, breath work, like central nervous system regulation.
Mhm. Kind of diving deep a little bit on the internal family systems.
Yeah.
Is that like is that going into your past and bringing up the memories of in your childhood where you did feel those very low vibrational emotions? And yeah, I guess what would happen afterwards?
Totally. Yeah. So usually when I work with somebody, like, I do use an order of operations, like most trauma informed, you know, coaches and therapists do. And even when we're doing trauma informed psychedelic preparation and integration, um, it's like basically the analogy is like you wouldn't throw somebody into the deep end without like giving them some skills and floaties and like how to like navigate the space.
Mhm.
So in order to prep for that work, the internal family systems, like you do all the things, like, you know, the mindfulness, the breathing, teaching them how to regulate with their systems, how to connect with themselves. And then, of course, as the person who's like helping them, you're building that trust, that safety, that rapport before we go into the deep end. So, so that's all really important for, you know, that deeper work with parts of us that, in internal families, they call them exiles, like parts of us that are so suppressed
Mhm.
that I don't want to say we don't even know it, because I truly believe that most of us know, but maybe just awaken to it once we feel safe enough. Um, so, you know, working with somebody with internal family systems, it's a process. So we start off with having conversations, and really what I do is I sit back and kind of observe the person. I just listen to how they talk about themselves. And at some point, most of us like make some sort of critical remark towards ourselves, or there's some sort of inner critic, right? And that's always the place that I usually go to with people, is like, well, who is that? Who's saying that narrative inside of you? And it's usually a parental figure, at least what I have found in my own experience of working with people. And so we begin to kind of go into that, like, okay, this is how the inner child was parented. This is what the inner child received. This is what the inner child did not receive. You know, they didn't receive, for example, protection, nurturing, all these things. Um, and so really beginning just to work with these two aspects to begin with, the inner child and the internalized parent from the parenting we received, and just really starting there. And then, you know, as we move along, working with the teenager, working with the aspect of self that maybe was abused, whether it was sexually, physically, or mentally. So we start simple, you know, and try to work deeper and deeper. And really, I try to only work with one part at a time, especially when someone's newer to this work, because you know, you want it to be integrated. You know, if we start working with all the parts at once, it's like it's too much, right? So working with each part delicately over time, so we can have those internal conversations and be there for our inner child in a way that we find loving and caring, with like that new developed inner parents, right?
So you were saying central nervous system deregulation with
Mhm.
ayahuasca, 12-step, and EMTR. So 12-step meaning like AA? Or
So yeah, there's different 12-step programs, but the one that I came to find, or someone kind of introduced to me, was adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. And it's basically a 12-step program that's geared towards addressing the trauma that happened in childhood. And the solution in that 12-step program is basically reparenting the inner child.
I just always associated 12-step with AA. Like I didn't know there was anything
Totally.
with it, but so thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you left your new job, you went back to your old one, and what were you doing there, and then how did that transpire?
Yeah. So I took all kind of the eye-opening experiences that were, you know, not to mention extremely uncomfortable from this job. And yeah, I went back to the place I was working at previously for many, many years. Um, and they were offering a free, you know, EMDR training, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy training. And I was like, this is great, because this training is not cheap, and sure, I'll go. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, to be honest. But I was a super skeptic. I was like, this is weird. Like, we're gonna wave our hands in front of people and they're gonna follow with their eyes and they're gonna be healed. Like, this is crazy, you know? So I was like super guarded. But by the end of the 2-day training, you know, because we had to go through the process it ourselves, I was like totally sold. Like, I was bawling my head off. I was like, I need to go find a therapist because I got a lot of shit to work on. Um, and yeah, so that training like really brought me into the world of trauma healing and trauma work, and really beginning to understand like what happens in our childhoods is really impressionable. I think for me, I had a really thick layer of denial like my whole life that I didn't even know about, because it was just taught in my family, if that makes sense. Like, we just swept things under the rug. So when that happens, you just do that with yourself subconsciously. And in that training, I had this like really interesting experience where I heard so many people open up about themselves and so many of us heal together, that I was like, okay, there's something to this. So, from there, I basically found a therapist and began to work with somebody. And then I went into the 12-step program. So things are going pretty good. Like I'm addressing like all, like I said, all the things that have been brushed under the rug, like all the things I had witnessed, all the traumas I had endured. And I still feel like something is kind of missing in my journey. I don't know what it is, but um basically this person begins to approach me at the gym I'm going to.
Mm.
And she was like, hey, like you should go see this medium. And I'm like, I'm good. Like, leave me alone. And those are my defensive parts, my protector parts coming out. And she asked me this two more times. So I'm like, all right, cool. We're gonna go see this person. So I make an appointment. I have no idea what's gonna happen. So I get into her office. She starts saging me. She has like all these pictures of angels all around. There's oracle cards. And I'm like, I don't know what is happening, but my life is about to change today. I have no idea what's going to happen, but just like the woo-woo vibes were definitely getting to me. I was like, all right, cool. So she starts channeling. So basically what that means is she closes her eyes and the spirits start talking to her, and she's just telling me all this information. She knows this stuff about my mom somehow. As my voice cracks here. She knows all this stuff about my mom. She knows this stuff about my life. And eventually, the spirits are saying, I like hallucinogens would be really good for you. And once again, I was like, I ain't doing no drugs. I had a very closed mind when it came to any psychedelics or anything like that. I at the time I was a drug and alcohol counselor, so this just wasn't clicking. But I was like, okay, cool. This woman knows a lot. So I ended up working with her for like 6 months, just on getting in touch with non-ordinary states of consciousness through hypnotherapy, through meditation, through talking to my spirit guides, to basically learning how to look at life in a way that I have never looked at it. And I'm doing all these breakthroughs with EMDR and this woman. And then at some point I was like, whatever that Ayahuasca stuff was, like, let's do it. I mean, that's how it is. Like, I didn't read a thing. I didn't even do the preparation. Like, and the thing I like to tell people is like, I trusted this woman with my life.
Well, first, I just want to acknowledge that, basically you were so in your left brain, right? With like being educated, being like a drug and alcohol addiction counselor,
Totally.
very like sciencey, very analytical, and then being exposed
Yes.
to this whole different world of all the woo-woo things, right?
Yes.
Like, whoa, for you to make that leap and that jump was like such a huge gap.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Just rewinding a little bit here for EMTR, who would you say is a good candidate for that work?
Well, so, I mean, I've worked with people who have done no inner work before, to people who are really experienced. So, I think anyone who's looking for a very like effective and evidence-based like trauma approach, EMDR is like, EMDR and somatic experiencing are two of the most like, evidence-based, highly researched, over and over again shows like really good results. So I guess the only times I'm trying to really think about this. So yeah, so I think as long as the therapist, works with the person to do a really good preparation with somebody, like it will be smooth sailing. And preparation usually includes, mindfulness, regulation skills, tools and techniques, we do an assessment called the Dissociative Experiences Scale. So that assesses like how much someone is currently dissociating, because EMDR is by nature is dissociating because we are looking at your trauma. So we take that number and just basically say like, you're going to be a little bit more amplified and a little more dissociated throughout the experience. So we just want to make sure you have the skills, tools, and techniques to navigate those waves as we move through them. It can be used for like anxiety, depression, OCD. It can be used for like any addictive behaviors. So it can also be behavior targeted and trauma targeted. It just depends on what protocol you're using. Someone who's like actively psychotic, for example, like you wouldn't want to step into that right away. You obviously want to get them grounded and stable before moving in that direction. But I would say EMDR is probably one of the most highly measured therapies I've ever seen. There's 3 ways we measure with each memory that we target. So
could you describe a bit about like what is somatic experiencing?
yeah, totally. So somatic experiencing is a way to, well, kind of just how it sounds, like somatic meaning the body, so in experiencing, allowing ourselves to experience, like, for example, eventually we get to a place where we can experience a trauma internally or like recall it, if that makes sense. And now maybe the experience is more integrated and neutralized. That's the end goal. We usually end up like targeting a trauma that we're going to work on together. And we do something called pendulating. So pendulating and somatic experiencing is like the ability to like find the present moment and then go maybe into the trauma and then go back into the present moment and then go back into the trauma. So it's really geared towards like that flexibility of the central nervous system that's often lost through trauma because we get stuck in that fight or flight cycle, or we get stuck in that frozen cycle. So helping someone find, internal and external resources, whether it's like anchoring with my breath to down regulate myself into my parasympathetic nervous system. So it's very body based. It is not talk therapy, although you do talk. But so when you're working with someone, you're really asking them often like, so what are you experiencing right now? What are you feeling in your body? Because even that question allows someone to draw into their own body and really experience it for themselves so they can integrate that like outside of session and when they leave you. So it can be used for a variety of things, not just trauma, but like stress, anxiety, depression. I feel like we all can use a little somatic experiencing in our lives, to be honest. Yeah.
We all need a little bit of therapy. Guiding you back to your story. So you did IF for the first time and you didn't prepare for it.
No, I did not. Well, this was my first psychedelic experience ever. And I was like, I did it in the daytime. It was very colorful. I was totally blasted out of my reality. And that was very jarring. But at the same time, once I settled into it, it's like we read about spiritual experiences. It's like very logical and this cognitive thing. And even at that point in my 12-step program, they talk about God all the time and spiritual concepts. And I read about spiritual concepts a lot. But for the first time in my life, I was actually like experiencing my own spirituality and connecting to my soul. And it wasn't just like a thought, but it was a truth that was missing. And, that truth is like there forever now. I continued to sit with this person. And here's the fun part. And I decided to Google like what I had been doing. Like I had never looked it up. And I was like, I wonder what this ayahuasca stuff is that I've been drinking with this person. And I Googled it, and in the Google search results, like this big pot of like a vine and a leaf come up. And I realized that that's what ayahuasca was. It was a combination of a vine and a leaf. I was going a little nuts in my head because I got this tattoo when I was 17. You know, while working with Pam, her name's Pam, we talked about soul contracts, and you make contracts with yourself before you come into this life and you decide what you're going to do. And I was just like, it was like this really scary, like ego death moment, but very sober, where I was like, oh my God, like I got this tattoo and I'll never forget. Like I spent days in my room drawing this tattoo, and I marched over to the tattoo artist and I was like, I want a vine and a leaf. And he's like, do you want some flowers? Oh, I said a vine and a leaf, bro. Did I say flowers? It was just the strangest moment of being like, no way. Like, have I been manifesting this like in this unconscious way in my life? After all the like mind-blowing experiences that I continue to have with this medicine and the deep, deep, deep healing, like that's why I keep coming back to this practice, is that there's things with this medicine, with psychedelics, but especially ayahuasca, that I could never facilitate for somebody else. You know, therapy's limited, and it's because humans are limited, you know. And the healings that I've received from this psychedelic, from this plant medicine, are just absolutely mind-blowing. And that's why I really love helping people prepare and integrate these experiences, because number one, it's like definitely the path that I keep getting pulled to. It's challenging. It's really hard to do it on your own, and to have like somebody to I don't know, help them prepare in like a trauma informed way, and like with a realistic kind of lens, because the truth is like those default patterns that we come back home to after the ayahuasca retreat or after the, you know, mind-blowing experience, they're strong. Like it's hard to integrate, you know, and like having someone to kind of reflect back and work with and kind of give you some insights and some tools, I feel like that's what make those integrations like way more effective and way more long-term.
Just curious, so how many times have you personally drank ayahuasca?
So I've kind of lost count, but it's over 45 times.
Wow.
Yeah. So and I would like to say it's like, I don't think a number matters for people. It's like the reason why I've done it so many times is because like I've received like this very like, and this is where it gets woo-woo for some people. Like I've received very specific instructions for like what my training is supposed to look like and what I need to complete in order to step into something of that nature. So that is why I keep drinking, because at this point it's like, yes, of course, I'm still healing and I'm doing my own work, and I'm constantly trying to understand like what this is all about on a deeper level. So, you know, some people have less experiences, more experiences.
I mean, it definitely makes sense that you've done it so many times because you're training to be somebody who serves it to others, right? So
totally.
that definitely makes sense. In terms of group size, is bigger the group the better?
I would definitely say no.
So like optimal number?
So, and this is kind of where I get on my soapbox. Like there are really big groups out there. There's like very large groups, like and I mean, there's a lot of safety risks that are posed with really large groups. People get kind of lost in the shuffle, if that makes sense. And I really do think this work is something that needs to be like a close eye, and you need it like a lot of individual attention. no matter how experienced you are, you know. So I definitely think like no more than 10 is like the optimal group. And
Wow.
any smaller than that, the better,
Yeah.
you know.
So when I did my Aya, we were like 73 people.
Oh,
Which it was my first time too, and I thought that was
yeah,
so big.
yeah,
But like thank God they kind of split us into 3 different camps. So it was
yes.
smaller, but it was still like 20 something, 30 people per camp.
And I think like that's where like, you know, where the ethics and the integrity and like setting and safety, like that's when these things really start to come into play. And they're like really, you know, stuff that we as people who are we really care about the ayahuasca community and how it's like getting integrated into the West. You know, these are some things like standards that we're trying to set. And right now there is no like, you know, standard for people who are practicing underground in the West, or even above ground with churches and that sort of thing. Like that, it's definitely what I, you know, that kind of twinges at my like, ooh, like, is that ethical? Like, is someone really getting, you know, but of course, like people have incredible experiences in those types of settings. I'm definitely not trying to say that. It's just like as we continue to grow and prosper and really make this medicine available, continuing to ask ourselves a question like, are we creating the safest and the most healing and effective space for other people?
For sure. I think that's a pretty major trend that we're seeing in like the overall psychedelic space right now. Like what is ethical? What is ethics? And how do we
Totally.
do that? And how do we do the things to help these people? Even though like legally, you know, there's a bit of gray area right now, but how do we keep our integrity as we facilitate that for other people?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a book by Kylia Taylor called Inner Ethics. And it's such a great book. Like anyone who is an ayahuasca facilitator or and facilitating any sort of non-ordinary state of consciousness work, whether it's psychedelics or breath work or shamanic journeys,
Mhm.
she goes through all sorts of situations and how to handle them in a really professional and ethical way. Thank you, Kylia Taylor, for doing such incredible work. Um, but yeah, it's a really good guiding post for all of us who are trying to figure this out.
Perfect. I'll definitely have to pick up a copy. Um,
Yeah.
so after you've done it a few times, and then at that point, did you then decide to go to do your training with the Ayahuasca Foundation? And how does that bring
Mm.
you back to like today and where you are now?
Right. Yeah. So from there, it kind of does fast forward and you know, lots of different experiences with lots of different practitioners, lots of different group sizes. I finally made my way to a group probably after my 10th experience. Up until then, they had just been individual.
Mhm.
Um, and I think, I think, you know, by 2018, that's when so yeah, first started sitting with ayahuasca in June 2016. And then by 2018, you know, I just kept having this experience where I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like this stuff is so incredible. Like I definitely had like everyone needs to know about it, you know. I really want to help people, you know, and I was like, how can I help people in a way that's like profound and deep and life-changing? And you know, I'm still thinking about serving and I'm still thinking about doing this, but I had a conversation with myself that was pretty uncomfortable. I was like, you know, if you decide to do this, like this will be your life.
Mhm.
This is what's happening. So you're going to commit and dedicate yourself to the path. And I kind of like had like basically what you would call like cold feet. You know, I felt like I was like fucking getting ready to marry something. I was like, this is a fucking lot of responsibility, a lot of commitment. And I did like a whole ceremony around it with somebody one-on-one. So I was just like, you know, I was like really torn. And then about a month later, going into the new year, like right before COVID hit, I got my answer. You
Mm.
know, I was like, I'm fucking married to this shit. I'm doing it. I'm about it. Like, this is what's happening. Um, and that's when I got this tattoo.
Oh.
Literally got it on my on my wedding finger. I was like, I'm committed.
Mhm.
So since then, it's just a lot of continued learning and growing and understanding, which I'm so thankful for. I mean, we're in an incredible time right now, truly. Like psychedelic wave, so many incredible things that healing is offering us, you know. So since I made that decision, just like constantly thankful for like what ayahuasca has done for my life and so many other people, and just watching like how it's totally going to change the world in the next 10 to 20 years, right? Now, just kind of what I'm focusing on is like giving people that preparation and integration experience.
What's immediately next for you in your journey and in your business?
Yeah, so continuing to do plant diets. So basically, focusing on um, yeah, just getting closer to the plants. And basically what that means for people who don't understand that, within the Shipibo lineage, you do something called plant diets, where you diet with the plant and you create a relationship with the plants. And you do that by going into isolation, no salt, no sugar, no oil, a very simple diet, like literally rice, eggs, and vegetables, no sex, no TV, mostly no phone. I can't seem to put that one down. Even in the jungle, my phone had to break in order for that to
Oh.
happen. So I am thinking about a diet early in January. And then I've decided to, even though I already facilitate breath work, I've decided to go through like a full-blown training in 2022 with David Elliott to do his level 1 through level 4 breathwork training. Breathwork has been so like integrated for me. And I find it like such an incredible experience to take people through, and it really helps us get to those psychedelic places without any psychedelics,
Mhm.
um, and just continue to do my own work.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm not perfect by any means. I'm always like pulling back layers and wanting to discover like deeper parts of my own psyche so I can bring that back to my community and my clients. Um, so yeah, I'm really excited for 2022. I don't know what it is, but I feel like it's going to be a really great year.
I think so too. I definitely have that prediction for sure.
Yes.
Um, Questions. So
Yes.
for diets, like how long do people go on that for?
Mhm. Yeah. So the plant diets, I mean, like you can do it for weeks, for months to years. So it really just depend. The more you do it, the more you're going to create that relationship with the master plant. You know, so some master plants that I've dieted with are Noya Rao and Bobinsana. And there's other ones like Chuichaki, Chiricsanongo, Mapacho, and there's a ton other that I can't think of or I don't know about right now. But basically, I'm trying to give people an analogy, but it's like going into deep meditation with these plants so you can create these deep bonds. So, you know, in terms of like, you know, what my intention with the diets are, and mostly in the Shipibo context, is that when you're facilitating the ayahuasca experience, you're not relying on your ego to make decisions. You're
Mm.
relying on the relationships you've created with the plant so they can talk to you directly and be
Mm.
like, okay, do this now. Like go to this person, help them work through this. You know, they help you see things in the medicine space that, you know, your own mind wouldn't be able to see. You know, so it's about like basically like creating a team of like spirit guides, but you would call them like spirit plants that are helping you move through life in this totally different way,
Mm.
you know? So through the process of isolation, through the process of removing all of the distractions, you really get to sit with yourself and heal aspects of yourself with the help of those plants. And through that, you create this incredible like relationship.
Mm. So how do you do that specifically with those plants, or like one specific plant? Are
Yes.
you eating them directly, or?
Right. Okay, yeah, good point. Exactly. Yes. So you're drinking the extraction of them. Yeah. So when we were in the jungle, we were given extractions of Noya Rao for a month. And
Mm.
you actually, there, everywhere I think is different, but there you don't necessarily drink a lot of it,
Mm.
So you drink a little bit of it the first day and then the third day. And then actually you don't have to drink after that if you don't want to. And then you're focusing on that relationship through, you're isolated in the jungle. You are not eating anything besides hard-boiled eggs, vegetables, and rice, like literally every day, 3 times a day, nothing else. And you're with yourself and all the yeah, so like everything in the Western world is like kind of taken away from you, and really all you're left with is like creating that relationship with the plant
Mm.
and smoking your mapacho, which is the other option as well. So I laugh, and it's like a pretty serious practice. Like through smoking of your pipe, you are connecting deeper with
Mm.
that plant. You're creating a more sacred relationship. So everything is very like intention focused and meditation focused.
Mhm.
And so through that process, whether it's 30 days, months, years, you're talking to that plant, you're receiving insights from that plant. Um,
Are these plants
just
psychoactive?
no, no, they so yeah, Noya Rao in the Shipibo culture and so Noya Rao and some it's very specific to some Shipibo lineages. Every lineage is a little different. But in this specific lineage that we learned from the Ayahuasca Foundation, Noya Rao is like how to explain this, like it's above ayahuasca, like the star of the show is not ayahuasca, it's Noya Rao,
Mm.
so it's very specific in terms of like what place do these diets have and like how important they are the most important thing in the Shipibo tradition. Ayahuasca is like, I don't want to say an afterthought, but the discipline of the diet and the dietas is way more like, and so here in the West, that often maybe is misunderstood for, a lot of reasons, right? But in the Shipibo context, it's like, this is the practice, is the diet and the dietas.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very different than in the Western world, how
Yeah.
we kind of, our perspective of things and whatnot. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. This has been so interesting for me because like I'm not very familiar with like that part of the psychedelic medicine, of the plant medicine, like the indigenous culture and traditions, and like rituals and customs. So yeah, that's been super interesting. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah. I had 2 points. I had 2 points that was brought up. So one was about breath work, and I totally agree. Like all of my breath work sessions, I've definitely gotten to this high where you just feel kind of like euphoric, or you start crying all of a sudden because you need to release something, or there's like huge tingling sensations all throughout my body that I'm like, whoa, I got that from just putting oxygen into my body.
Totally.
And it's free and I can do this on my own. What?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then just a comment about you are also a work in progress, and we're all working together to be
absolutely
on our own healing journeys. And I think that's a really important point to kind of drive home a bit, where there is no end destination. Like you're not going to 100% be healed. Like these are layers.
right.
So even after
Totally.
you kind of peeled back a layer, you might go back and revisit that lesson from, whatever the universe or life sends you, and you'll have a deeper
Right.
understanding of that.
Totally.
That's
Yes. Good.
new insight for me recently.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. I couldn't have said it better.
Mhm. Okay, question about what would you say is the biggest misconception that the public has about ayahuasca?
Mm. I guess when you ask that, the person that comes to mind is like the person who's maybe like scrolling through social media or just like looking for something to help them. And they come across an advertisement for a retreat center that says like, come heal yourself, come claim your sovereignty, come do all these things. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions there is that like by doing this, everything is going to be fixed. And it's like I I guess it's hard because I'll just be like super bold and say it like retreat centers need to make money, right? Like that's like I totally understand that. And I just also think as we move along the continuum is like we really need to start being a little more transparent about the integration process and like how much work it's going to take to really take these insights and these healings to make it a part of our true and whole self. I think that's the biggest misconception is this is going to fix me. This will be the thing. And it's not, and I think we can have really deep revelations and insights, and then understanding like coming back home or just coming back to ourselves, right? And integrating those experiences. It's a lot of work. And I think what I like to always say is like I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer or negative Nancy at all. I just think it's like a realistic conversation that we all need to feel comfortable having together. So I think that's the thing that I have seen in my own journey, you know, being blasted into divine one consciousness and then coming back home after 2 to 3 weeks and being like, oh shit, like the dishes are irritating me, and it's like that's, reclaiming my sovereignty in the small moments. And how am I going to do that? And it's through like having those tools and techniques that we've been talking about, like the mindfulness and the breath work and learning how to work with different parts of ourselves and reparenting ourselves and all of these things.
I totally agree. And I think like the sexy part is the, going on the psychedelic trip, right? It's like all the, blasting, like going to outer space and doing all that type of stuff, right? What's not sexy is preparing for it and then integrating it.
I love how you said that.
Right? That's actually like the harder thing to do, because anyone can go for a night or whatever, a few hours and have a good time. Or what are you going to do about it afterwards? Like that's the lifelong process that we should all be going on.
Yeah, it is very sexy. I like how you that word, I don't know why. It's so it mirrors what's happening right now or what I'm definitely seeing. And it's I'm definitely not trying to, and I know you're not, I'm not trying to shame anybody who likes doing recreational experiences or anything like that. I guess what my intention of speaking to that is like people who are like really vulnerable and truly suffering. And that's where I think it's like, where as professionals, we need to be telling the full story. That's basically, what I think we're all trying to get at. It's like, we got to be honest with people about what they're getting into, because you're going to end up opening up more boxes than maybe you wanted to.
In one of the recent integration circles that I sat in, one of the things that I brought up was, my Aya ceremony was so beautiful and I was so empowered to feel a certain way, or like, to take inspired action and whatnot. But like it's been months since my experience. And so I feel like it's slipping almost. It's like, oh, cool. How do I get that back? Do I continuously just sit in ceremonies, or can I actually do something now and like go back into that memory and pull it back? So that's something that I'm trying to figure out right now.
Yeah, definitely. And that experience is so common. It's like that blueprint that we receive, and it's so clear, it's so crisp, And then I like how you said that. It feels like it's slipping, you know? And I forget, there was another documentary I watched where he described it the same, and I describe it the same way too. It's like, it seems so clear and so crisp when you're in the experience. And then, yeah, so I think,
So before we go into lightning round, where can our
sure.
listeners connect with you online?
Yeah, so Instagram is the best place to find me. That's where you can book appointments with me. That's where you can find about my breathwork circles, podcasts, YouTubes, all the things.
What's your handle?
The Multidimensional Journey.
Cool. Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, so this is how the lightning round works. I'm going to ask you a
Yes.
series of questions and you answer with the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm a little scared.
Ready? Okay. What's the biggest limiting belief you discovered about yourself?
I'm not good enough.
It's
Yeah.
really common, actually. I think everyone.
It is. Yeah. And it's one I'm still working on. It's like not something that I feel like has worked, you know, just integrated so simply overnight. But yeah, it's definitely awakening to that aspect of myself has been very fruitful in integration and overall healing.
Mhm. I think that one's maybe like the root of all of the different stuff.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Okay. Besides ayahuasca, what's your second favorite psychedelic medicine?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I mean, if you asked me this like in 2017, I'd be like, no, ayahuasca is the only one for me. But since then, I've been blessed with so many other opportunities and experiences by incredible facilitators. So psilocybin is definitely another incredible sister teacher to me. And then I would say MDMA.
Mm.
Yeah, both have been like, I mean, yeah, so psilocybin has been more challenging towards me than ayahuasca at times.
Oh,
And
wow.
then and then MDMA, I've never had a faulty experience with that. It's always incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. What is one specific way of how you downregulate?
Through my breath, you know, deep breathing, inhale, longer exhale. So longer exhale is always to get into the parasympathetic nervous system. And I think like just, you know, if I'm in a tizzy, if I'm like, you know, it like in my anxiety, I like to, you know, pull myself closely in and like kind of just talk to myself and then be like, hey, you're okay, you're safe, you're allowed to feel what is happening. So getting closer to the experience rather than wanting to distract myself or numb or kind of run away from the experience. Because that just actually prolongs it, which took me forever to figure that one out. But by actually allowing myself to go in it, it totally like dissipates it way quicker. So either through breathing or by like getting closer to either the somatic experience or the mental narrative, whatever it is, giving myself that space to actually feel it.
So in the moment that you are experiencing that, going into your breath, going into your body, and also talking yourself through the process?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. What's the latest lesson that you learned?
Integration's hard work.
Yeah.
So basically back home since June, it's just been a lot of and the only way is through. Like, so I think even my own brain wants to take shortcuts sometimes. And it ain't happening. So, you know, it's not like a very enlightening one. It's a very sober and grounded one. But yeah, it's one I'm definitely like continuing to work on. And just showing up for myself.
What's your favorite quote?
The quote is, choose a job you love and never work another day in your life, by Confucius. So I definitely think that's been a mantra of mine for sure.
I didn't know Confucius said that.
I hope he did, because that's what it says at the bottom. So whoever said it, I think it was Confucius.
Last question here. What do you want the world to know?
You deserve all the love and the happiness that you want in this life. You know, you're absolutely worth it. You absolutely deserve it. No matter what you've been through in childhood, no matter what traumas you've experienced, anything that you want in this life is totally possible. It might not seem that way. It might seem like really hard and terrible and full of suffering, which is also a part of life.
That's a really good reminder for everybody. So thank you for that. Yeah. Cool. Well, it's been a pleasure, Sarai, as always.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for blessing us with your presence. I'm super grateful that you made the time to connect with us and to share your story and to allow me to really just ask you a whole bunch of questions, because like it's been so interesting. It's been such an interesting and inspiring conversation for me. And yeah, I just want to thank you for the work that you do, because I know that you're helping a lot of people that needs it. And yeah, thank you for being an inspiration to all of the aspiring liberated leaders.
And thank you, B, for putting this podcast together. Putting podcasts together is not easy. It takes a lot of organization and like incredible work. So I'm really excited for the other people you'll be interviewing and all the information that they'll be able to get out to the world. Yeah, so thank you so much for building this community.
My pleasure.
Love it. Yeah.
Well, I'll catch you later.
Yeah. Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by Akita Agency. We transform overwhelmed healers into liberated leaders with our signature Akita Liberation Loop method. We help psychedelic therapists and coaches evolve from a one-to-one to a one-to-many client model by co-creating evergreen funnels that lead to online courses and group coaching programs. We have a special gift for our listeners, a complimentary, bite-sized training series to level up your evergreen funnel knowledge. If you're not familiar with or feel overwhelmed with marketing, sales, and funnels, then this training is for you. Just go to akitaagency.com/tutorial. Thank you for listening to the Liberated Leader podcast. If you found value in today's episode, then please, 1, leave us a positive review, share it with a friend. 2, join our tribe on social. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Until next time, to your liberation and beyond.